Hello.
Here we are. We seem to
Oh,
have untangled everything and gotten everything in place.
I think
And
so.
and well, that was another set, I'll tell you. They just keep cranking them out.
they began with Iko Iko, which was very, very appropriate because St. Louis is where the Grateful Dead debuted it in their repertoire on May 15th of 1977. I happen to know that particular fact by heart.
And it's just way up the Mississippi from New Orleans as well. So it all kinds of fits in. And of course, Black Throated Wind got the big cheer for the I Left St. Louis City of Blues line. Mr. Weir,
And,
always with a sense of occasion.
and Big River, of course, describes a trip down the Mississippi River, which takes you right past St. Louis, and it's mentioned in there too. So they definitely hit the local reference jackpot here in St. Louis. Hey, let me just run down the whole set list for you, friends. Iko Iko, Cold Rain and Snow, Ship of Fools into Big River, It Hurts Me Too, Black Throated Wind, Jack Straw, and U.S. Blues to close out the set.
Right. Bobby stepped up the tempo on Jack Straw after the first chorus. He decided he wanted to make it a little more sprightly, and that was nice. It kind of had a nice upward trajectory to it throughout the song.
Very good. We should quickly mention that we're here on behalf of nugs.net to keep you entertained between sets if you're already subscribed to the feed. But if you're watching this free preview someplace like YouTube, we want you to know that you're going to get the first song of the next set for free as part of this deal. And you can go back and watch the first song of the first set for free also as a sample. But what they want you to do is go to livedead.co and sign up to purchase the feed. And if you do that right now, you can go back and watch the first set. And in fact, you have 48 hours to watch it as many times as you want before it goes away. There's also lots of audio download options, and there are season passes to the entire Dead and Company tour. There's just a ridiculous amount of amazing video. My wife and I are in the middle of watching a 2-part Van Morrison live special on nugs.net that we're really enjoying. So a lot of that is available to you if you go to livedead.co to find out more. We will remind you about that again a little later, I imagine.
That's right. And this is, as you may know, called Dead Air with Lambert and Gans. And, I figured it out now. I'm visualizing it as I'm looking out into the audience. So David is to his left, to my left, instead of to the right of this TV screen. So if I just point to my left as if David's over there, I can identify properly where he is. Isn't that amazing?
Wait, but I have to point to my right to get to you. Okay, I get that.
Right. Yeah. All right. Just look out into the world rather than at yourself, and everything's just fine.
We're just testing each other to see if we're drunk or something.
That's right. It's like we've been pulled over and they're making us touch our nose or whatever. So.
Hey, let's get on with our. We should invite our guest in. He might appreciate our humor, and then he might have something more useful to say. Bill Kreutzmann asked us to invite this gentleman to join us because his work is important, and he wanted you to know about it. And Gary and I did a little homework and discovered that we think he's pretty goddamn interesting too. So let's, without further ado, welcome Paul Stamets to Dead Air. Hello, Paul. It's very nice to meet you, sir.
Hey, Lambert and Dan. Pleasure to meet you too.
Go ahead, Gary.
We just met you and already we're on a last name basis. I love that. Anyway, just want to say I had read somewhat about your work over a period of years, but I took a deep dive into it today. First watching a marvelous documentary about your chosen field, which is mycology. And you will explain mycology to the world in just a moment. A film called Fantastic Fungi. And then I listened to a wonderful episode of Oteil Burbridge and Mike Fenoya's Comes a Time podcast, which I recommend to everybody. Listen to every episode you can because those guys do a great job. And this is an episode that had both you and Bob Weir talking about your chosen field. So let's talk about that chosen field for a moment, shall we?
Okay, well, I'm a mycologist. That means I study fungi. Fungi are a separate kingdom from plants and bacteria and animals. And many people don't realize that actually fungi gave animals birth. We split from fungi 650 million years ago. In a sense, fungi are our ancestors. This is why most antibiotics that are active against from fungi are active against bacteria that are pathogenic to humans or to animals. We share in common many of the same pathogens that afflict fungi also afflict animals. And so the defensive properties that fungi have developed are very useful for protecting us from infections, especially bacterial infections. But I'm speaking to you, I have to say I want to give my respects to the Calus Nation. I'm in the unceded territories of British Columbia on a remote island in Desolation Sound in Canada. So this is really amazing to be able to have this technology. As bad as COVID is, it's built a huge community. And I think it was I have to look this up, but I think it was 1988. I saw Timothy Leary came to Olympia. And I thought he'd be talking about LSD and all these psychedelic substances. But all he could talk about, it was this emerging thing called the internet. Now, many of you are younger, you grew up with the internet as just a fact of life. But at that time, it was just sort of, there was something called, I think, DARPnet or something like that.
ARPANET,
and I was
yes.
trying to get, DARPANet. And I was trying to get information on psilocybin mushrooms. And when I go to libraries, all the books have been razored out of information. And, I was seriously into the taxonomy of the genus Psilocybe, which contains the most of the psilocybin mushroom species. And I was constantly, it was a reflection of the interest that people had in these obscure scientific journals. People would just tear out the pages. And so, but I eventually met a professor who was the head of botany at the University of Washington, Dr. Daniel Stuntz, and he took me under his wing. And which was great because I was a long-haired hippie. And I spent a lot of time in the basements of libraries, and then I specialized in scanning electron microscopy using an electron microscope looking at fungi. And that is where I had reels and reels of the dead. And I played Terrapin Station, just nonstop, and I just had amazing sort of seances with the dead by myself in front of this electron microscope. So it's a very fun part of my creativity.
So tell us about all the great things mushrooms can do.
Well, right now there seems to be a mycological revolution sweeping the planet. And it's happening at, I think, a time critical where we have to have a paradigm shift in consciousness. And so, the widespread usefulness of fungi is surprising to a lot of people. Some of the faux meats now are made of mushrooms. They taste exactly like meat. Stella McCartney is really spearheading replacing animal leather with mushroom leather. The medicinal properties of mushrooms have been very well established as adjunct therapies for overcoming many of these diseases, especially cancer, and then bolstering the immune system. But the zeitgeist of our time clearly is psilocybin mushrooms. And that is what is sweeping the planet. That's so exciting. There's 68 approved clinical trials at clinicaltrials.gov that universities and companies have disclosed to the FDA with FDA approval on using psilocybin clinically to fight depression, anxiety, PTSD, and many other forms of mental challenges. But what's our research has been finding, which we're so excited about, is I clearly think that psilocybin mushrooms increase intelligence and they build neurons. Wow. And this is something that we have the scientific evidence of this. We have submitted a paper that's been accepted. I think I can say that with great certainty. We have an app called microdose.me, and there's over 14,000 people on this little app, and you can measure your cognitive skills, your memory, your eyesight, your hearing. And it's basically on microdosing. And that's what a lot of people are doing, are taking a below threshold dose of psilocybin mushrooms below that which they can feel. So if you take a little bit and you feel it, that's not a microdose. And so you might feel a little happier with a microdose, but you don't feel intoxicated. You have no sense of intoxication. So microdosing is something that's really picking up a lot of momentum. And the research that we've been doing has found that it stimulates what's called nerve growth factors and BDNFs, brain-derived nerve factors. These are basically the proteins that code for neurogenesis. And psilocybin substitutes a serotonin, your primary neurotransmitter. And so it's like a spark plug fluid that's a lot better in some ways, temporarily, but it dislodges serotonin for 4 to 6 hours as the experience. And then in doing so, it just opens up an enormous amount of data that you can receive. And, through evolution, through obvious, factors we can barely understand, we have a very narrow slice of reality.
When you say data, you mean like perceptual data? This opens you up more to what's going on around you? Is that what you mean?
Well, that's a great question, because for people who are not psychonauts, who have not tripped, which probably in this audience is next to no one. But for instance, I'm looking outside right now. I don't see fractals. I don't see mathematical patterns. When you're fully imbued with psilocybin and LSD, a massive amount of mathematical information comes at you. I mean, just think if you were an early human and you had this experience. It inspires art. Art inspires creativity. Creativity inspires happiness. Happiness then reverberates through the community, through your neighbors, through your town, through your village, through your clan. So this spark of creativity, leads to a happier existence. When you're creative, you're happier. When you're happier, you're more creative. When you're depressed, you're not as creative. And there's actually excellent studies, even in the New England Journal of Medicine, that shows that the immune system is depressed when you are depressed. So the malaise that we all feel, the malaise that we feel in these times, all the stress factors, we're all suffering from some form of PTSD now, I wager to say. That's not an exaggeration. We're all tired of this. And moreover, psilocybin mushrooms make people nicer, more empathetic, kinder. There's a meta survey that I like to mention. It's really interesting, is that people who have had one dose of psilocybin is associated with a statistically significant reduction. These are prisoners, 200,000 some prisoners surveyed by DSHS. And they found that there was a statistically significant reduction in larceny, burglary, and violence if you had tripped once. On the order of 16 to 30%. Now think of the return on the investment for law enforcement. People only trip like once a year or once every few years. But look at the reduction and the cost of the court system, of prosecutors, of marginalizing people who, really don't deserve to be in prison. And moreover, to put people in prison who have the cure for social ills that reduces recidivism and going to prison in the first place is one of the ironies of this whole situation that we're in.
Well, wow. As you said, there's a lot of legit studies going on now, and that's a really great thing. I have a relative who's in the process of becoming a therapist who uses psychedelics as part of it. So we're starting to see a really wide acceptance of it, and various states have legalized it recently, right? How's that going nationally?
Yeah, I was just on with one of the members of it's called Measure 109, the ballot measure in Oregon that decriminalized and legalized the therapeutic use of psilocybin. I'm on their committees. I do another testimony, so to speak, on Thursday. It's moving very rapidly. They have about a year and a half to have the therapeutic guardrails put into place that people can grow, they can have commerce in it. In the state of Oregon, not outside. And this is really important that we emphasize. There is a really major movement of the people through the ballot initiatives to legalize psychedelics. In Washington, D.C., it was 70%. Now, the politicians these days, they're so adverse to trolls, to being stereotyped. They very few of them dare to be brave enough, but the people's initiatives are sweeping. And in a democratic society, when 70% of the people, as in Washington, D.C., vote for decriminalization, the politicians are supposed to reflect, and the laws are supposed to reflect, the will of the people. So this is a worldwide revolution from the underground right now. This is an uprising that's occurring. And so Oregon is, the use of psilocybin mushroom for therapeutic purposes has a lot of challenges. Standardization, batch-to-batch certainty, how they're prescribed. There's a lot of work to be done. So it's really important that we get this right.
I'm sure. I mean, my own personal experience indicates that dosages vary and stuff. So to try and regularize all of that for scientific purposes has to be quite a challenge. I also wanted to ask you about lion's mane. I was told that that's a particularly interesting mushroom to be looking at, despite the fact that we had some for dinner the other night.
Mm-hmm. Well, lion's mane is a icicle-shaped edible mushroom. It's white in color. There's a commercial name that actually I think is ingenious. They came up with it. They call it pom-pom blanc, like the pom-poms that cheerleaders use, right? So Hericium erinaceus is Latin name for it. It's an edible and choice mushroom. It tastes like shrimp if you add a lot of butter or crab. But it has these novel compounds called erinacines, and they also stimulate nerves to grow. And there's evidence showing they regenerate myelin on the axons of nerves. Myelin is a sheath that transmits the nerve signals. So demyelination, unfortunately, is a consequence of age. Those people who have Alzheimer's, there's a strong association with demyelination and amyloid plaques. And so what lion's mane does has been shown in clinical studies, 3 of them now. And I populate a website, it's non-commercial, just for scientists and researchers. You can look up all this information. It's mushroomreferences.com. And it has like 64 psilocybin articles in the scientific literature. It has, I think, 24 or so lion's mane articles, including 3 clinical studies. But they found with people with mild cognitive dementia and progressive, that patients who would take lion's mane, several grams per day of these capsules made from the mycelium, they were able to improve their cognitive functions and decrease the slope towards neural degeneration. And then resecting mice in controlled experiments, they were able to authenticate this. The interesting thing is bundling them, stacking them. Lion's mane with microdoses of psilocybin. That's where we have hit the home run. And we're real excited. We have a new paper that we're submitting to a renowned scientific journal, basically from this microdose app, microdose.me, because it's become the most popular stack out there with the psilocybin users and microdosing. And so because we had so many people in this vast data set, we were able to parse it out. And it doesn't really, you can't really see signal from the noise from a 20 to 30 to 40-year-old group. They're at the peak of their health. But over time, it's a sad fact of life, especially as we get older, we suffer from neurodegeneration. So what we found in the 55-plus-year-olds, an astonishing discovery. And it's related to something called the TAP test. Now, anybody out there who's had traumatic brain injury or know of a relative or somebody's had Parkinson's, even Alzheimer's, the TAP test is how quickly you can tap your fingers in 1 minute. It's a standardized, validated test. It's used widely throughout psychiatry. I looked it up. I think there's over 100 peer-reviewed articles validating this test. Because with Parkinson's, unfortunately, and Alzheimer's, traumatic brain injury, you not only lose the speed, but the cadence. It's hard for your brain to connect to your fingers. A whole bunch of neural systems are involved when you think, I'm going to tap my fingers, to actually tapping them. There's not one neuron. It's a whole entourage of different neurons that are involved. What we found was so astonishing is that in 55 plus years old, with lion's mane and microdoses of psilocybin, there was a massive increase in 30 days in 55 plus year olds for the tap test. I think it's going from like 43 taps per minute to 73. Now, I look at Mickey Hart and Billy and Teal and John. Hey, they're all digitally active, right? They're all, and all musicians are depending upon this neural pathway. So I want to give credit to many of the musicians, some of whom that we know have been basically doing microdosing for a very long time. And I think it speaks to their sustainability of their skill sets. But this research now is opening up a lot of other questions. We have not only genetic expressions, not only we have the microdose data, but we also can see under the microscope a proliferation of neurons and branchings. And so neurogenesis, neuroregeneration, and is helping offset these neuropathies.
It sounds great. How does that manifest? Will I see better and hear better and play guitar better?
Well, I would gamble on the last one, but with the hearing and the seeing, the jury's still out on that. We have so much data. There's millions and millions of ways of the challenge tests that are given at microdose.me. It takes about 25 minutes to go through the test. So you have to have a pretty dedicated core group. Because we had 14,000 plus people, we still got several hundred people who are disciplined enough to record their tests every week for 30 and 60 days. So it's exciting. I think a lot of us people using psychedelics, we felt smarter from the experience. We felt like better people. We're empathetic. And I think now scientifically we're seeing that actually is true because it fundamentally helps you rewire your brain. And I'll dare say it, I think psilocybin mushrooms are Einstein mushrooms. I think they increase intelligence.
Paul, one thing I wanted to discuss, one thing I was reminded of in the documentary in Fantastic Fungi, but I've heard about it over the course of years, is that psilocybin and other, I guess you'd call them psychotropic fungi, not only have these beneficial effects, in immediate use, just instantly improve cognitive function, but they are credited by some people with having participated in human evolution because these spores have been around for so long, for millions of years, and that it's thought that human consciousness got a boost from the use of these substances.
Well, what you're referring to is the stoned ape hypothesis, is what I call it. They call it a theory. But now I think it's actually moving into a theory because we can see now that there is increase in neural function, and in a very, very short period of time. So when the Terence and Dennis McKenna first sort of proselytized on this hypothesis that primates, in response to climate change, note to self, tracking ungulates, animals across the prairie would encounter this mushroom. And if you've ever found Psilocybe cubensis in the tropics, it's pretty hard not to see. You can see it about 200 feet away, this big golden tops coming out of a cow patty. And so they theorized that our primate ancestors would find these. They're hungry. Most primates eat grub, maggots, so they're looking in mushrooms for food. And then you would take these mushrooms, you'd share it with your family, you'd have this amazing experience. It's very bonding. And you have all these fractal patterns and these visual acuity increases. And, as we all know, so that for a primate would be a significantly different experience from ordinary consciousness. Okay, that could happen once. No, it wouldn't happen once. It wouldn't happen 10 times. It happened millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of times. Epigenetic neurogenesis. And so when you have that type of stimulus from the environment onto your brain, collectively by large groups of individuals, primates, this was totally mocked for a long time. I was one of the mockers about the stoned ape hypothesis. It was a great stoner conversation to have, but people were opposed to Galileo and to other great scientists of their time. I think this is becoming increasingly plausible because now we have the scientific evidence showing there is neurological benefit, there's psychological benefit. And if the problem of anyone who's suffered from a great tragedy and has PTSD, it reverberates throughout their family and their community. It affects not just the individual, but everyone that they're associated with who are trying to help them. The adverse of that is if psilocybin can help you overcome your PTSD experiences and you become a better person, well, that also reverberates. So it's not just about the individual user. It's about the entire community. It's about your families. So there's been a lot of studies on this. And I recommend that you can go to clinicaltrials.gov. You can look up these 68 studies, Yale, Harvard, Stanford, UCSD, King's College in England, Imperial College. It's a massive movement in science right now. And then it's really important that all of us create some discipline here so we don't go off the guardrails. We don't want someone trying to fly off a building. Never heard of that, by the way. I've never saw documentation of that, but there was a widely spread. And psilocybin doesn't, destroy your DNA. It probably helps it. But I think it's really important now, the science as it's developing, and what I know, which I'd love to, I can't share it all with you. This will be in publication within the year. Several papers are coming out showing that psilocybin and lion's mane together in particular stimulate neurogeneration far beyond the expected cumulative effect. So 1 + 1 is 2, that's what you would think. But in our case, 1 + 1. And so there is a massive synergy of stimulation of nerve growth factor proteins that then code for generation of neurons. And so neuropathy, I think, could potentially be reversed.
So a civilian like me can go to this microdose.me and sign up and be part of this thing?
Yeah. It's a free app. You own your own data. It's anonymized. It has gone through ethics review boards at medical universities. It's all been vetted. And our first manuscript is quite large. It's 31 pages long, but it covers mostly it's the horizontal study, demographics, your age, your sex, your income, what you're microdosing with, et cetera, et cetera. Our second paper is what we call the verticals. The verticals is cause and effect. And now the counter arguments, and it's always good to mention them, is the placebo or expectancy effect. So with depression and anxiety, that's subjective. If you're depressed and you're anxious, but you're doing a microdose and you're now in the community of microdosers, I'm microdosing, you're microdosing, we're all microdosing together, I feel better. Well, of course, there's some effect, but you can have a placebo enhanced effect of a real effect. And that's what we think is going on. But for the contrarians out there, medical doctors, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The placebo effect can be useful for people psychologically. However, there's no possible placebo that can be described for tapping your fingers, increasingly so. Over the course of 30 days, there's a progressive increase in the finger tap. So the majority, I don't say the majority, but many older people die from falling, who get a hip injury, who get an infection and die. So coordination and age. And I just think of the great pianists, the great guitar players, the agility of being able to be neurologically functional than an elder pianist or a guitar player can teach a younger person, because they have this massive wealth of knowledge. But to have all this knowledge and not be able to physically articulate it, is hard for us to pass down this knowledge to the next generation. So I think this increases the body intellect of skill sets of our entire society.
Wow.
So playing music and doing things that use my manual skills helps keep me from aging?
I think just in general, I just heard of a test that I hadn't heard of before, wiggling your toes and wiggling your fingers before you get out of bed, kind of to wakes up your nervous system. So, of course, exercising, you're reestablishing the same neurological pathways that you've practiced. The more practice, the better you get. So, of course, that's happening also as a baseline. But I'm talking about something much more significant than just a baseline. This is an
Hank,
augmentation of skills.
we need to wrap this up. I'm sorry to say this has been so fascinating, but the band is back on stage and we're a few moments away from lights. Paul Stamets, thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to go check this stuff out because I want to know more. This is really intriguing. And the Fantastic Fungi movie is awesome.
Yes,
Yep,
indeed.
Louis Short is a fantastic. He's an amazing filmmaker. So,
And it's
He's a great
available
guy.
on various. It's available on various streaming platforms. I want to watch it again right away. And
too.
I think we're about to see a little more consciousness in action with Dead and Company. The second sets tend to remind me of some of my finest mushroom experiences. So let's
Indeed. Well,
see if
but-
they build us a nice
we have
scale
to-
model of that.
mention the Nugsnet stream here. If you're watching the free preview from nugs.net, they want you to get over to livedead.co and convert it to a paid thing so you can watch the rest of it and go back and watch the first set as well. Livedead.co will also give you options of downloading audio in a bunch of different formats and subscribing to the entire tour, access to a whole bunch of other stuff like Bruce Springsteen in 1978 and Van Morrison from a few weeks ago, and just tons and tons of amazing music in their library that you would have access to in various ways by visiting nugs.net or livedead.co.
All right, so we're just waiting for that word, and this happens to us sometimes. Sometimes the band just gets on stage and they just say cut it, and other times we have to vamp a little bit. But Paul, once again, this has been absolutely fascinating. I'm so glad that Billy Kreutzmann turned us on to the idea of having you on, and of course it was great to hear Bob Weir talk about the experiences he's had, and Oteil. So. We know the band is on board with this. Much of the world is getting on board with it. And as the prohibitionist mentality wanes, I think we'll keep moving in the right direction toward a higher consciousness.
You're welcome to cut me off, but until the band comes on, I'll just give you another factoid. There's more than
Please.
116 known psilocybin mushroom species. 116 circumpolar around the world, from southern Chile all the way up into northern Alaska, all across Europe and Central and South America, of course. So there's this is a medicine for the planet, and it's a medicine for the people on the planet because it's not isolated to just one culture. And I think psilocybin mushrooms lead us to one giant consciousness. And that we share this consciousness together. We just don't know it yet.
I like it.
But we're on our way.
Right. And
I like
it's integral to preserving life on the planet, ecosystems, all of that. It's astonishing the role that fungi play in the entire history of the earth and humanity and all species. So stay tuned. More to come. The band has us vamping, but that just allows us to spend a few more seconds with you, Paul, and that's great. So really great to have you
Say
here.
something else. We still got time, apparently, so keep talking.
Okay. I mean, I have a wealth of facts, but I realize that people want to know, what's the significance of this? There was another meta study that was done. If you had one psilocybin experience, a statistically significant reduction in partner-to-partner violence. Think of that.
Wow.
This might be a pre-dating question. Have you done psychedelics? Yes. Okay, you're a safer bet as a mate, because
Right.
it turns out that there's a direct association. There's an increase in pro-democracy political views. There's an increase in pro-environmentalism. Well, we all know that. Anyone who's done a deep journey with psilocybin mushrooms feels so connected to the oneness of the earth and realize that we're part of this amazing biological system, and we're all playing an important role of it. And we need to be better citizen scientists. And that's what the message that I constantly have gotten ever since the 1970s when I did my first heroic dose of psilocybin. I heard the earth is in trouble. Paul, we're calling out to you. Don't you see? Please, for your own, for your own survival, take this responsibility at heart. This is why I think First Nations and Indigenous peoples really had it right. The concept of 7 generations is so important. And languages and cultures and ideologies may be different, but the conquest of one dominant society against another society, the amount of knowledge that we've lost, the fact that we have this knowledge at all is a testimonial to the fortitude of the heroic, torchbearers who've carried this knowledge into the future. Now, fortunately, in this day and age, we're building upon that. The science is validating a lot of what Indigenous people all over the world, and it's not just the Indigenous people in Central America or it's Indigenous people in Europe and Africa, and how many of these groups, these cultural islands, shrunk because of oppression, disease, religion, conquest, and the cognoscenti had to literally go underground in order to protect the sacred knowledge. And then, things happen, right? And then you lose an elder, or you lose an encyclopedia. So it's amazing that we have the knowledge that we have today, because this barely made it through.
And we're living in this weirdly bifurcated world where so much progress is being made in one sense and so much repression is being promulgated on another, right? It's mind-blowing. So it's great that these things are happening, and the sooner the consciousness expands around the world to more sense of unity, the better off we're all going to be. I agree with you completely.
Yes, indeed. Yep. And I really love the suggestion that the decrease in violence brought about by people taking psilocybin. Because we all know the way that certain substances exacerbate violence or antisocial behavior. Oops, the lights are down. For another time, Paul. Thank you so much. Enjoy the second set, everybody.
Thank you.
Running from your window, I was all night running. I wonder if you care. I had a run around and run down. Run round the corner, a wild snack in the tree. I had to move, really had to move. That's why, if you please, I am on my bed. Earth, don't you come around here anymore. Dress myself in green, go down. Said I'm going